Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It is 4 o'clock here in Los Angeles. Welcome to Sentence Correction. Today's lesson is obviously out of sequence. Hopefully you guys all had a nice holiday weekend. We're also on a Tuesday. But I think today's lesson kicks off what I will call the week, although it's really just 2 days back to back, of course, of strategy in here. In my opinion, this is the most important week in terms of strategy, folks. I do not think that there's any other week in this entire course back to back like this in terms of verbal and quant that packs in as much strategy per hour as these two lessons do. So it is so important that you really soak it up. So let's get into this world of sentence correction, guys. Sentence correction is going to be laid out just like the skill builder by the impacts model. We'll go through each of those in turn. But if you came to today's lesson just trying to get a clarification on what is a subject and what's a verb, you're going to be sorely disappointed. You know we don't talk content in here for the most part unless it's by way of talking strategy. So what is it that I want you to come to class trying to accomplish? Really, it's about appreciating the number one go-to strategy, which is the world of decision points. It is easily a game changer as far as sentence correction is concerned. Obviously, logical meaning kicks off the impacts model, and so that is the most important element, some would argue. You want to become pretty comfortable with that. Misdirection, we've seen that everywhere where they know how to sell you on the wrong, hide the right. We want to be pretty aware of how they screw us in the world of sentence correction. In fact, go back again, hour one, day one. Again, the most important hour in my opinion. And I said, look at the top of that pyramid. Right, the bottom of the pyramid is what I need to know. Middle of the pyramid is what I need to be doing, which is important. But the top of the pyramid is what I need to be watching out for, and I think this misdirection is so key. And on that note, hopefully you guys got a chance, it seems like a lifetime now though, to digest those emails that I sent out on Friday. Obviously there were quite a few. I think there were 3 that I sent out, but one that was, actually there was a 4th one if you include the midpoint email. And so hopefully you digested that and that helped you get on your merry way. But to me, I just want to comment real quickly on, because one of those emails I loved, that girl was talking about, I think, hour one, day one. Like, that's what she needed to, like, just rebalance herself just days before she went and just killed it. So just things to just kind of think about. So that's all I really wanted to say to start. So let's kind of just get into some sentence correction, folks. They say here that, look, sentence correction is not about knowledge purely. You got to know a lot of stuff. But if all you can do is know, you're effed. Like, you got to be able to do a hell of a lot more than that. And so they say the strategy is actually often more important. I think that's a good comment to make. They say it's quite different than editing a newspaper, and I think that's true. I think a lot of people will look at sentence correction with a blank slate. Again, it's the same people that look at math as short answer type questions, where they don't appreciate the answers being assets. In my opinion, if there's one section of the world of verbal where answers are definitely assets, it's sentence correction, guys. And in some sense, it's the most mathematical as well, which also makes it, I think, the easiest of the 3 sections to not, show some serious improvement quickly as well. Because I think between quant and verbal, much easier to show improvement in quant in a short period of time. Again, very rule-oriented. And then once you start to understand strategy, you're able to knock it out. And so what they say here is that it's all about strategy to some extent. And so what you're going to find here today is if you start to embrace this decision points process with open arms, even if you did not crush the skill builder, you might actually surprise yourself and do pretty damn well in here today. That is not necessarily because these questions are easy. I don't think that they are. Some, of course, are. But it's because that skill builder is a tough skill builder when you look at English in a vacuum. The best news is you don't ever have to do that ever again. You got to know it. And thus, even as we go through today's lesson, if you didn't even do the skill builder, you'll probably get run over. And that's okay. That's on you. But as you go through this, if you struggled a little bit with the skill builder, you put in time, but in some sense your head is still spinning as to like, hey, a possessive pronoun, this and that, don't worry, I think you'll be all right if you embrace decision points. So what is decision points all about? Decision points is the process with which to basically tackle sentence correction questions. If you think step one is just to read the sentence, you are wrong. That is clearly step number 2. So what the hell is step number 1? Scanning answer choices. So remember when I said answers are assets? This is exactly where it starts. Note the verb scan. Scan is not read. Scan means scan. Seconds is what it should take. Pro tip, do not scan left to right. Scan top to bottom. If you scan top to bottom, you'll be able to see differences emerge. Now, the differences you're looking for have to be impacts differences, folks. Very important you understand that. I can't tell you how many idiots spot differences in the answer choices and then start trying to make decisions based off of that. If you never learned anything about it, what exactly qualifies you to start making decisions based off of that? It's common sense when I say it like that, I think. Yet there's a lot of people that just kind of in one out the other and then just start to just be them, and it doesn't make sense because you just get shit wrong. So it is so important that if you're looking for differences, and you should be, that they be impacts related, stuff that you learn something about in the world of the skill builder. If not, you start to make sort of false decision point type mistakes. And so that's the kind of stuff that you want to avoid. Stuff that's outside your pay grade, as I like to say in here. Now, what are some of the differences you should be able to spot if they're present? Obviously, first and last few words. If you miss those, again, that's on you. How the hell are you missing first few words, last few words? I get if you miss shit in the middle, but you can't even look up and down at the beginning or at the end. That's nonsense. Pronouns and verbs, very important. In fact, what you'll start to realize if you haven't already is the English language is incredibly challenging because there are exceptions to even exceptions, seemingly. And thus it could make your head spin. Good news about the impact model is there's certain error categories where it's black and white, folks, air frickin' tight. Like noun pronouns, they got to agree. There are no exceptions. Singular, singular, plural, plural. Subject verbs, they got to agree. There are no exceptions there. And thus, if you pick up on those types of things, if they're being tested, man, oh man, you are in for an easy win. Step 2, after you spend those first few seconds scanning, gets you to read the sentence. But when you read that sentence, you ain't reading for pleasure. You're reading to get the job done because you know what's being tested. Very important you understand that. I can't tell you how many people, again, will finish a sentence correction lesson in here and then will actually email me maybe a week from now and say, hey, you know, when I look at a sentence correction question, I just don't know how to start. I just don't know what to do. And that's when I just put my head down. I say, did you even listen to one effing word that came out of my mouth during these 3 hours? Because right now it's the most important part of the entire lesson. To me, that's the same response that you should have if someone said to you, hey, when I see that pop up on the quant side of things, I just don't even know what's being tested. You should feel sincere pity for that person in life, not just on the GMAT, in life. Because when you look at something like that, that looks like a shape, so already how the F are you not talking geometry? Not to mention, if you're in the world of geometry and you can see that there are 3 sides to said shape, hopefully you recognize that as a triangle, and you should be busting out triangular knowledge. Like, that's what someone should be doing, even if they don't know what to do. You don't look at that and be like, I don't know, probability. Like, if you do, you're at the 200 level. So these are things that you need to appreciate from a quant perspective. People do that all the time in the world of sentence correction. It makes no sense. Like, oh, I see a sentence correction, I don't even know what's being tested. How the F do you not know? The impacts model teaches you everything you need to know about what's frequently tested on this exam. Not to mention, if you scan these answer choices and pay attention to some differences, isn't it abundantly clear? Like, oh shit, when I read the sentence now, what you're testing me is on a pronoun, or what you're testing me on is a verb tense. Like, whatever it is, you should have a good sense of what's being tested. Then as you're reading it, all you're doing is recalling the rules that you've learned. Again, I'm not going to lie to you and say you don't need to know a lot of different rules. You do. And then you're thinking about how to apply it correctly. But note this third step, guys, because this is a very important step that people just do not understand. It says eliminate incorrect answer choices. It does not say select the correct answer, and it's with good reason. When the questions get tough, and they will if we do this correctly, it is incredibly challenging to find the right answer. Why? There's a million ways to say anything and have it be correct. And thus, even if you're the finest of wordsmiths that exist out there, when you look at the right answer on a tough question, you're going to be like, I don't love this. But remember in the world of verbal what the burden of proof is. I don't need you to love Jack. I just need you to like it more than you do for others. And so when you go to town in the world of sentence correction, looking to eliminate what you know to be wrong, you'll get stuck with what has to be right. And that, from a strategy perspective, is important. Any idiot can find the right answer when the questions are easy. But it's for that same reason that a lot of us struggle in the quant side of things, because our approaches are half-assed. They get the job done when the shit's simple, but then we don't know how to scale it when the stuff gets tough. That part of this journey has hopefully been put to rest here if you're embracing the way I like to think. You want to be working with ways that start from, the easy street all the way to the tough stuff. And to me, it's all about decision points for that reason, and staying true to this. Now, am I going to say to you that, hey, decision points is the greatest thing since sliced bread and it's going to work on every single question? No, I ain't going to say that. At least it doesn't for me. Maybe it's because I suck at sentence correction. But what I will say is I still know how to use it, and I try to use it whenever I can. But if there's certain situations where it doesn't work for me, I don't get stubborn and try to jam a square peg into a round hole. So for example, for me, when the whole sentence is underlined, I find that this has less utility. But if you can make it work, make it work. And to me, again, if you go through this entire 3-hour lesson, just you trying to be you, not even giving two shits about this decision points process, and just trying to get stuff right because your ego won't allow you to get stuff wrong in here for whatever jacked up reason, and you're already not a 90-some percentile, which my guess is you're not, otherwise why the hell would you be here? Go work on DS, which will rock your world tomorrow. Then what are you gaining out of this lesson? Again, it is so important that we come at this with basically eyes wide open and try to soak this up. I want to repeat again, in my opinion, this entire week, meaning back-to-back days now, most important in terms of strategy. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this started, guys. I want to go ahead and get into the world of the impacts, starting off with the I, illogical meaning. All we're going to go through is all these 7 categories in turn. You know, the skill builder lays out for you everything you need to know as far as illogical meaning being concerned. When you start to see the language change in meaning in the world of explanations, this is what they're talking about. But let's be clear on what change in meaning means and what it doesn't mean. Change in meaning does not mean, oh, the author didn't mean to say that. At least, how the hell do you know what the author meant to say? You never had a conversation with the author. Hell, it's hard enough to think like the test maker, let alone try to talk with him. So let's not get crazy when we start talking about change in meaning. Change in meaning, I would argue, simply suggests that perhaps there's an alternative interpretation that's possible, and that's not a very logical one to make. So as an example here, take a look at this first guy. It says the main goal of the cell research department at Johns Hopkins is cancer. If you read something like that and you have no problem with it, I am okay with that. In fact, today you may be surprised by how often I'm willing to give people free passes in here for not just seeing things immediately. Because I think sentence correction is tough. And so when you look at a sentence like this, I got no problem if you don't see a problem with it. None whatsoever. But that's the best part about sentence correction. You will never in your life face a question like this. Instead, what you would see is perhaps a portion underlined and then another option. You get 4 options in reality. And then the other option would say something like this, let's just say. So it says, is cancer versus is finding a cure for cancer. And when you scan vertically, top to bottom, not horizontally, you'll say, hey, why does one say is cancer? Why does one say is finding a cure for cancer? What's the difference there? Like, that's all I want your brain to process. So I'm giving you a free pass. You read that first sentence, you got no problems with it, I'm okay. I'm still on your side. But if you don't stop and say, one says this, one says that, why the F does that say that? That's the fail. Because once you get to this point, then you start to say, okay, well, this looks like a predicate over here. What the hell is the subject? Being able to identify subjects and predicates, one of the most, if not the most important skill in the world of sentence correction. And so when you look at the subject, you hopefully identify it as goal. And if you suck at subject-verb identification or subject-predicate identification, go into Google, type that in, end up on some 5th grade or 6th grade website. Don't feel sad for your life that they're talking to you like a 5th grader or 6th grader. It's a very basic skill you just need to have. And thus you get to this point and you say, hey, is the goal cancer or is the goal finding a cure for cancer? What makes logical sense? And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Why are they trying to achieve cancer? These guys are supposed to be heroes in the lab, not villains of sorts. So this is a bust. I see what they did. They created an illogical meaning there. Changed the meaning of the sentence. That's what's going on. It's not that I knew what the hell the author intended. I don't know shit. I never talked to the guy who wrote that sentence. But what I'm able to understand is that the way it was written, even though I kind of knew what they were trying to communicate, that's why I didn't find a problem with it, wasn't actually correct. It was illogical. And thus this option here corrected that mistake. Now, part of the reason why I didn't know that there was a problem in that first sentence is because some of us are just super lazy when we talk. We're not very precise. We expect others to kind of pick up the slack for us and just kind of fill in the gaps if we leave any there. And to pay that forward or back, we do the same thing when others are talking. So when we see sentences like this, we know what they're saying, let's move on. But you can't do that in the world of sentence correction. So obviously, week 2 critical reasoning was all about thinking like a lawyer. I'm going to argue here today that week 4 sentence correction is talking like a lawyer. And that's because, again, so much of what you can interpret here in these sentences could be viewed as just interpreting sentences in a contract, clauses in a contract. And thus, anytime you can litigate over a sentence, like, oh, well, I want to argue this other meaning, it's a shitty contract. Contract's supposed to be airtight. And you didn't do your job well in terms of drafting it. And to me, this is what you start to see here. So I want us to be thinking about this kind of stuff here today. All right, with that then, and obviously the Skill Builder lays out all the content. I'm not concerned about content today. And by the way, if you didn't do the Skill Builder, save yourself 3 hours. Log off. You don't need this lesson for anything. Come back, watch it when it posts. But if you did do the Skill Builder and ideally crushed it, then I think that we got a lot to be learning here today. So let's kind of get this process started, beginning with this first question. I love this question. I think it's an easy question. But to me, it's about starting to get things done correctly. So that starts with decision points. Do decision points. It's very decision points friendly. With that, let's put minute 15 on the clock. Remember, by the way, you know that in the world of verbal, you have on average a minute 48 per question. There are people in here that will have no problem at all spending 2.5 minutes in the world of critical reasoning. 2.5 minutes. If you spend 2.5 minutes in the world of critical reasoning, that means you got to make up somewhere else along the way, on average, 1 minute and 6 seconds per question. That's just the law of averages. There is zero chance you'll be able to do that in reading comp, on average. So where is that time typically made up? Typically sentence correction. So if you look at sentence correction, you say, oh yeah, I could do these questions in 2 minutes a pop, I'm doing pretty well. I'd say you're probably not. I get that you're getting them right, but you're probably spending a hell of a lot more time than you should be. So here's an example of if I spend 2 minutes on a question, I decide to shoot myself, because this isn't a tough question. If I'm a 99er, I'm looking to tighten this up so quickly, it's not even funny. And this is where, by the way, embracing decision points allows you to dismantle these things like, I don't know, serious bomb squad expert type people. Like, you could do this question, you could get it right in a minute 15 seconds, and you could feel good about it. But if you start to tackle this with that sort of methodical execution that I'm trying to get you to embrace, this should be done in 30 seconds, not even a second more. So with that, let's put a minute 15 on, bring some respect, let's get this started. All right, guys, so let's slowly start taking a look at this question here. Doing pretty well to start. So first off, let's begin with this basic question. When you scanned the answer choices for impacts-related differences, which differences did you spot that said, hey, I need to decide something about this? I think that's solid. Patrick, for sure. Tommy, Sim, great. Jason, Felipe, Nick, awesome. David, be careful. I want to comment on that too with Molly. And so a lot of you guys picked up on the pronouns, which is great. Rock solid. The it, v, they, that's huge. I'm not sure if anybody mentioned the tense. I don't really remember, but if you did, that's good. Clearly some present tense everywhere in terms of either progressive, plural, so on. But I do want to comment on what a couple of you started mentioning right off the bat, which kind of worries me a little bit. You start talking about in effect and so that. Remember what I said at the very beginning. If you didn't learn shit about a difference, you don't even want to let it cross your mind. And I would argue right now, you didn't learn shit about these differences. The skill builder didn't write anything about it because there's nothing to write about it. In fact, I could create a correct version of this sentence using either one of those to begin. So to me, that's a false decision point. Get burned now so you never burn yourself again. Again, there's no risk here. Who cares? But on test day, if that happens to me, again, that's how those false negatives start to occur. Which, by the way, you know, I sent you obviously a handful of emails. So what I said was one of the best emails, which you may disagree, was that girl who totally crashed and burned. Because what she would do is bullshit in class. She would just false negative every single, not every single, but pretty much every class. And when I'd say something to her, you know, in the beginning at least, when I thought she was receptive to change, she'd just make excuses. And then what happens? Of course she chokes. What the fuck does she expect? So don't be that girl, basically. Now, as you take a look at this, it is so important to ignore those first few elements. The rest of the stuff, yeah, let's pick up on it in a big way, especially pronouns, singular v plural. Dude, it doesn't get any easier than that. So, question for you now. When you looked at the original sentence here, what clue did you use to figure out what was wrong? Meaning, remember, your job is just to eliminate what you know to be wrong. I've got singular, I've got plural, I've got no pronoun, but you know that's a quick way to fix a pronoun, of course. So yeah, a lot of you are picking up on the dolphin, which is great. The one is another indication, because remember, the dolphin could be a tricky noun. It could be like the fish, which is potentially plural as well. I love that you guys picked up the it's, for sure. That's a big time to Sim and Nathan. I think that's great. But I want to talk about what Jason and Felipe and James are picking up on. Huge, guys. You guys are picking up on stuff that is very often overlooked. If you didn't notice that and you got the question right, again, don't be too happy just yet. Like, I want to be such a beast at this section that I'm like, oh yeah, man, I didn't just use one tool. I had like 4 different ways to tell me it had to be not plural. Not that it had to be singular, but that it had to be not plural. And so when I look at something like this, the verb, remember, if it's outside the underline, it's 100% grammatically correct. That's loaded with information. Namely, the subject being singular. And since this pronoun down the road is just borrowing essentially the subject, yeah, for sure, it's got to be singular or non-existent, but definitely not plural. So immediately, choice A, dead, choice C, dead, B, D, E, I can live with those. So, and those, by the way, are the only answers on the board, which is huge. Again, so if I get this wrong, at least I'm 1 and 3 all day long. I'll take it. So look at what choice B says. So that it creates its own farming equipment. Looks good to me. I have no problem with it. Pronoun matches, singular, verbs correct. So what's the problem with choice B? What concern should I have when I read choice B? And don't tell me, well, it's an illogical meaning, because no shit, all of them are going to be that way in the first section. Creates is not a problem. Don't say that, Felipe. Creates is not a problem, though. I don't really, I don't know. I don't really have a terrible problem with the tense aspect to it. Yeah. I mean, I get, you know, so let's go back on something here for a second. So, you know, another comment that one of you made is about the words there. So to Tommy's point, I want to be careful. I think a lot of people start to actually, you know what's kind of funny? I think a lot of people start to make themselves out to be English experts of sorts, and it's hard not to. Like, again, everyone, you know, it's like everyone's got an opinion kind of thing. And so then when you look at something like this, you could be like, well, yeah, it's too wordy, or, you know, it just didn't sound right. And these are all very common responses to sentence correction. Wrong answer, so to speak. But the one thing that I would say to you is that's not a good way to approach sentence correction. You want to have actually an identifiable violation of sorts. And so when we rewind back on this, I want to point out what Tom is saying and correct Felipe, and even to Molly's point here. Like, I think a lot of us aren't putting a pause on this and thinking about logical meaning here for a second, because I want you to think for a second, if I were to talk like a lawyer in here, and if I saw this as a clause in a contract, I'd say, Your Honor, what these guys are proposing is that this dolphin is actually going to go out there and build a piece of farming equipment. And when you see that, you realize dolphins can't build farming equipment. They're not humans in that sense. And to me, I think that's what you want to start to think about. Exactly. It's like Finding Nemo Part 3 or something. And so as you start to look at it, be careful, because here's what's going to kill people. When you read even a choice like E, it says creating effective farming equipment. What are you going to say? Well, I like the tense now because some of you wanted it to be some sort of present progressive, I guess. And I don't know if it has to be that way. But I'm okay with it being that way. So what's the problem here? Well, it goes back to that literal interpretation once again, folks. And so as we start to go through sentence correction, let's be careful. Let's not start to pick random ass shit out of the sky that we didn't learn about. Because remember, in the skill builder, they didn't have a section that says it don't sound right to me. They didn't have a section that says, oh, too many words. And that's with good reason, because those aren't good reasons to eliminate answer choices. So I want to get all these opening kinks out right now so that we can start to move forward on this in a much better position. So to me, choice B dead, choice E dead. So what do I got left? Choice D, in effect creating its own farming equipment. Notice what they're saying. They're saying in effect creating. Because they ain't literally doing it. They're just in effect doing it. Of course that makes logical sense. And thus choice D, best answer for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, Gurpreet. Remember, you know, the way, and then there's a whole essential versus unessential information bit. But remember, so this last piece here with the commas, because I felt like someone was talking about commas also earlier, and I was like, what the heck? Like, this is just a modifying phrase at the end there. It doesn't even really matter in some sense. Like, the original sentence is boom right there and it ends. And so then, you know, this other stuff is just extra filler. But if, in this case, to Gurpreet's point, if we pulled it out, it wouldn't help us on this question. In other questions, it may. So yeah, generally, that's a good question and a good way to think about it. But here, obviously, limited utility. All right, with that then, and most of us, all right, good stuff. With that then, and most welcome, I want to take a look at this next question. So again, look, you guys crushed that question overwhelmingly. And again, even to those people that I was saying like, hey, you know, you're talking about too many words, or you're talking about it don't sound right, you didn't get it wrong, so I'm not that worried. But that shit wasn't hard. So as a result, like, I want to make sure that we're starting to think about it the right way moving forward. Now, are we going to get 80-some% right on this question? Hell no. Why? It's a harder question to start. First of all, notice the whole thing is underlined. So right now, right off the bat, decision points becomes a hell of a lot more challenging. And that's okay. But the same thing should start to apply. Exactly. So the one thing that I should say to you is, remember on this last guy here for a split second, we were able to eliminate 2 answers immediately just because they went, in this case, plural. 3 went non-plural. This third one was non-plural, so it stayed on the board. That's sometimes what we call a 2-3 split. 2 go one way, 3 go the other. Well, when you find even a whole sentence underlined, but if you see a similar sort of error reproduced elsewhere, thank the GMAT gods. You're still eliminating answer choices, still making some good choices. Because again, the 1 and 3 on the poll, not embarrassing in the slightest. Totally where I'd want you guys to be on it. But we want it to be tighter and tighter. So as you look at this question here, again, go through it methodically. Remember, we're in the section of illogical meaning, so I don't want to say spoiler alert here, but that means there's probably some illogical meaning somewhere. Be able to start to spot it. Let's talk when 2 minutes are up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. We are now hovering around the 50s on this, and rightfully so. Starts to again tell you that, hey, this is a much tougher question. Now, good news is that everybody saw that there was some sort of error. Nobody picked choice A, and as a reminder, choice A is just the original. Everybody picked something from B through E. That's great. Already a step in the right direction. But let's start to rewind back and start breaking this down methodically. Again, to me, it's not about right answers, wrong answers, but how we're breaking it down that matters. When you see this language, in contrast to 19th century wars, I would argue there is one category of error in the impacts model that should have popped out immediately when you saw it. What was that category of error, folks? Yeah, all right, good stuff. Absolutely right. And again, you cannot look at if you're looking at this right now and saying, oh, I don't actually know, why the F are you here? This isn't a complicated question. Like, this isn't like, oh, it'll get better by the rest of the day. It ain't. You're wasting your damn time. Like, when you look at something like this, if you don't recognize right now it's a comparison-based question, then immediately you're the same guy who's looking at the triangle on the screen and saying, I don't know what's being tested. Now, Lisa, I think that's fair. I think, you know, there are a lot of categories of errors that I think can be challenging. To me, it cannot be, however, subject-verb agreement or noun-pronoun agreement. And so I want to make sure we make that our super strong suit. Comparisons, I can get them because I think they are intentionally tricky. Remember the rules for comparisons. They're very simple. Got to keep them logical, got to keep them equivalent. But that logic is always what trips people up. And so we'll see more comparisons here today. But right off the bat, when you see that it's, on one hand, I got 19th century wars, what is the sentence comparing on the other hand, folks? Again, you knew one hand was the 19th century wars. What was the illogical comparison that they presented on the other hand? Be careful, guys. God, no. Dude, you guys are fucking gonna die today, man. Felipe, David, Sim, Minyoung, Jonathan, Raju, 100% correct. Did we do the skill builder, guys? Please don't scare me today. I hope we're not coasting in off of our whole I speak English every day, I should be good. Like, hell no. Not in sentence correction. The comparison is 19th century wars on one hand to the troops killed on the other, guys. There is no World War I in the mix. Hell no. I mean, I get that it's in the sentence, but that ain't the comparison. Remember how first of all, remember how modifiers operate. You start a sentence with a modifier, the very next thing better be what's being modified. So in this case, the very next thing is the troops. So it's the troops that are being compared or contrasted to the wars. That's like an easy layup type question. But let's put that on pause for a second. I dare to ask a more challenging question because I actually think it's easier, but what the F do I know? Question for you. What is the verb of this sentence? There is only one verb, the dominant verb, the main verb, whatever way you want to look at it. What is the verb of this sentence here? Okay, so good. So most of us are saying resulted. Some of us are saying killed, and that's fair. I want to, though, clarify which resulted we're talking about. Are we talking about resulted number 1 or resulted number 2? Which resulted is the verb here, folks? Felipe, that wasn't a choice. Are you making your own damn choices now? Number 2 killed? The hell? In this case, yes, it is the number 2 resulted. It is not the number 1 resulted. And it kind of goes back to even Gurpreet's comment / question earlier. Remember, this is inside a comma setup here. in theory, I could pull out this entire comma clause, it's a modifier phrase there, and it could be dead. And if it's dead, then there's no way a subject or a verb is going to be in there. Exactly, Brandon. So now let's rewind back on this. If this is the verb, what is the subject of that verb, guys? And maybe that's Stephen's question. Hopefully that's your question and it's not something way worse than that. All right. Oh, I don't even remember that. You got to throw in a clip during the first break on that. YouTube that. So, dude, Felipe, man, you're hilarious. You're gonna. Why do I feel like in question 6 you're gonna be talking about the troops being killed somehow? So here's what I will say to you guys as you start to rewind back. 100% correct. It is the word troops there. It is, thankfully, and I don't know. Most of you guys did not even try to say this, but I'm worried. No one tried to tell me World War I, unless I missed it, because it's easy to think that because it's the noun right next to the verb. But remember, this is in a modifying phrase as well. It's in a prepositional modifier. And so exactly. So anytime, and let me give you a very important pro tip for the day of sorts. An object in a sentence is not going to be the subject of a sentence. I think that's a very good rule of thumb to follow. So here, this is an object in a modifying phrase. It ain't the subject. In fact, even right here, battlefield is an object in a modifying phrase. It ain't going to be the subject. This killed, some of you thought it was the verb, which is okay. If I said over 2/3 of the troops killed, then what I would have to have is the object that they killed. People, animals, I don't know what. But I didn't get an object there, which then changed this from being a verb to now being a participial modifier. So I don't have a problem if people thought it was a verb at first, but hopefully in retrospect you're like, oh yeah, that can't be the verb. And so as a participial modifier, it's just modifying something else. So in fact, what you see is a bunch of modifiers. This is a prepositional modifier, prepositional modifier. All this stuff just keeps modifying the thing that came before. So it's like, which troops are you talking about? Oh, the ones that were killed. But where were they killed? Oh, on the battlefield. But which battlefield? You know, the one in World War I. It's like, oh, okay, got it. Just adding more detail, more detail, more detail. Well, the number 2 strategy that we're going to talk about here today, after decision points in the second hour, start to introduce it now though, is this notion called slashing and burning. And the idea is that, look, half of this crap is so irrelevant on all these damn sentences, and that's what makes it challenging to analyze. If that's the case, F it. Pull all that shit out, toss it and burn it. And so here, the way you do it is you start to kill modifiers. And if all these are a bunch of modifiers, then I can just toss it in its entirety. And then what am I left with? Over 2/3 of the troops resulted from direct combat. Now, do troops result from direct combat? No. Troops don't result from direct combat. Casualties may, fatalities may, but you know, you got to think in this particular case, troops killed don't even. Think about what's going on. I think what you're trying to say is that deaths, perhaps, but that's not the same thing as troops killed. And I think you got to be a little bit careful about that. And so exactly, David. So to me, when I look at something like this, I say, all right, I know that choice A is illogical because of what it's suggesting. It's subtle, but it is suggesting it. All right, good stuff, Stephen. So then I've just got to see if others have the same issue. So when I look at choice B, I say, oh, thank you. You have the same in contrast too. I got war. So I've got 2 errors that I've now saw on that first guy. So any one that I find that reproduces, I'm happy to kill it. So I got an in contrast too. Sweet. I got wars on one hand. What's on the other? World War I. Okay. So that's not really a violation. That's logical. What about over here? Does it have troops resulting from direct combat? No, it doesn't have that. So it stays in contention. I come to choice C, I'm like, sweet, I got another in contrast too. So I got wars on one hand, what do I got on the other? Oh no, sorry, I got troops on one hand. What do I got on the other? Clearly troops here, so troops to troops, that's the logical comparison. But do I have a situation where I have troops resulting from direct combat? It does look like it. Even choice C is now dead. Now notice choice D says while. While is not going to be always a comparison-based trigger word. You want to pay attention to comparison trigger words, you know, to Lisa's point and others that may have a challenge with some of these comparisons. If you can spot certain clues that tells you that what's being tested is a comparison, just store it up there and be on the lookout for it. So here when I see choice D, I'm like, oh, while, maybe it's a comparison. Then again, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just telling me something currently is happening. So I just leave it. Ugh. Whereas could be a comparison trigger word. On the other hand, it might not be. You know, what you find sometimes is like whereas is like a classic contract term or legislation term, just setting up like a, hey, given, considering, since, so on. But I identified another problem, which was the logic, so let me see if that's there. So choice D, are there troops resulting in direct combat? You betcha. Choice D, dead. Choice E, do I have troops resulting? No, I've got casualties resulting. Okay, so choice E stays. So I don't even know what is correct right now, but I do know what is incorrect. Because all decision points teaches me to do is become kind of like that sentence correction assassin Felipe was talking about earlier. Like, to me, that's all I want to be. I want to be razor sharp focused on what I know to be wrong. And that's and dude, if this is where you tap out, B versus E, I will take this all day long. All day long. Who cares? Like, to me, it doesn't even matter anymore. Like, I got to my fighting shot. And that's a huge one. Remember what I said on day two of the verbal section, right? Really, session 3. Do I want to be student 1 or student 2? Student 1's got hope. I made a wrong choice, but at least I was down to the right answer and my wrong answer. I can live with that all day long. Whereas there are people in here, from time to time, who are just in, am I in this pile of shit today or this pile of shit? It's like, it don't matter. You're just covered with shit. Like, take a step back, smell it, and see it. So now when I'm looking at this, I got to figure this out. So it says, in contrast to 19th century wars in which most casualties resulted from disease, World War I had over 2/3 of its troops killed from direct combat on the battlefield. Sounds good to me. I don't have a problem with it on its face. But that's the kicker about logic, by the way. Logic is very subtle. Sometimes it's easy to overlook it. So question, is there any issues you have with choice B here that said, this doesn't sit right with me? Yeah, awesome, Jason. I think you're 100% correct. And I hope that's what you guys are suggesting, or girls suggesting, Vivian and Molly. You know, when you look at this, wars don't have troops. You know, that doesn't make logical sense. Exactly, Lisa, and right on, Felipe. Like, you know, you can have countries having troops, you can have tribes having troops, but the war themselves, I don't know. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't really make sense. Now, whether they're killed from, I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me. You could say died in direct combat. But I don't know what to be wrong. So, like, this is where you got to be careful, Jacob, because there's certain things that are going to rub some of us the wrong way. And I'll tell you this much, even though I say I suck at sentence correction, I'm a borderline wordsmith, having spent many a year practicing the law. So I know not to operate outside my pay grade on some of these because it's so important. Look for the low-hanging fruit first. So to me, just saying, hey, wars don't have troops, like I got this pronoun here refers to the war, but that doesn't make logical sense. I could kill choice B all day long. So then when I get to choice E, what am I left with? Whereas most casualties in 19th century wars resulted from disease, over 2/3 of the casualties in World War I resulted from direct combat on the battlefield. Is it the way I would say that? Not necessarily, but who gives two shits of what I would say? No one asked for my opinion. Like this, when I look at this, I don't have anything wrong with it. And if I don't have anything wrong with it, you better believe it's going to be the option that I select. Because this ain't pick the answer that you think is best. It is pick the best answer out of the ones that you got. And to me, I think that's the way you need to be thinking about it. All right, good stuff, Jacob. So if you notice here, obviously performance suffered on this question. What's the reason for it? Obviously the whole thing's underlined. That's a pain in the ass to start. But also more troubling to me is that we weren't so great in identifying what the hell is being compared. We weren't rocket science style on this one where we were able to nail without even thinking subjects and verbs. Please make sure if that was even a momentary lapse for you, you put that to rest. That is so important for you guys to be approaching future questions having down. David, I think that's a good question. I don't like that wording, you know, that we get to be creative. And you know, I think what it just means is, you know, we're going to talk about this next week when we get into advanced verbal, and we talk about it being the whole sentence matters. And what they mean by that is, hey, look, when it's outside the underline, there's always some sort of clue that's there for you to harvest. Remember, as a 99er, the GMAT test maker is constantly whispering, at times yelling to me what I need to do on a sentence. When the whole thing is underlined, you're kind of effed. That's, I think, what the only message the test maker is setting you. And that would be at least my line of thinking on that. All right, with that then, I want to get into this next section here, the world of modifiers. There seems to be some spirited discussion there on something about casualties. I'll let Megan kind of take care of it as it's kind of scrolling past my screen here. Modifiers are an important category of error, folks. It is so important that you start to realize you don't need to know all the vocabulary terms for modifiers or for anything in that case. Like if you don't know what a positive phrase modifier is, I don't really care. Like you ain't gonna see it on the test. It's not gonna be like, hey, what's a positive phrase modifier? Can you identify it? No. So as long as you understand it, then I think I'm okay with it. But here's what I would say, to you is when you start to read the explanations, what you'll start to find is that a lot of times they're going to bring you back to grammatical references, and if you don't understand what grammatical term they're using, then you're kind of going to be, and then it's nothing be gained. So there is some utility in learning these words, but remember, it ain't the ends at all. Now, even these, what is the rule for modifiers? The modifiers are so damn simple, guys. The rule is very simple. Put the modifier as close to as possible to the thing that it's modifying. That's it. Nothing else. If you can get that shit touching, like those relative clause modifiers, which really require it, you win. A lot of times you can't get them touching, and that's okay. Just get them really, really close. So look at this example here. Bill usually drops any groceries he's brought home from his job on the kitchen table. Again, you read that, I don't have a terrible problem with you not seeing what's wrong with it. But again, you would get more than one option, 4 options to be exact, that would have it in a slightly different way. And then I would expect you, as you start to look through those vertical scans, or at least just ask that question, why are they placed differently? But remember, it's all about talking like a lawyer. So when I look at a sentence like this, what am I looking to do? I'm looking to litigate, as always. I'm looking to say, Your Honor, this is bullshit. In this case, he doesn't work on the kitchen table. I mean, we all know what they're trying to say. But the way it's written, his job ain't on the kitchen table. If you say, well, isn't it possible he works from home? I'd say, hell knows. Because notice what they say, he brought it home from his job. So his job can't be inside the home. The problem is that this on the kitchen table should have been modifying the groceries there, but the way it's written, it creates a very ambiguous contract provision. And we don't want ambiguity on this test or in the contract provisions either. And so you find an answer choice that obviously corrects that. All right, with that then, I want to take a look at this next question here. I think this is a great question. Now, it's another whole sentence being underlined, but I think it's easier than the last guy. But let's see. Let's put 2 on the clock. Let's bring some respect. Let's talk when time's up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this question here. And by the way, you know, I got a chance to kind of scroll back a little bit and see some of the comments that were being made. And I just want to be clear, you know, you would expect choice A to be right about 20% of the time. Again, if it's a well-written standardized test. So to the extent that if I look at sentence correction, I always find something wrong with it, I run the danger of effing this up. So don't be afraid to pick choice A as long as you know there's nothing wrong with it. So it made me just think about this other this blog post from clearly a few years back now. Because actually, you know, I love a lot of the things that Brian used to write. Now he's writing a hell of a lot less frequently, if at all. But to me, this post right here was a great one, because my guess is you guys have all had some experience or heard some horror stories of some shady as F auto mechanic who at some point will tell you everything under the hood is wrong with it when it's like a brand new car, there's like nothing wrong. And so sometimes we do that in sentence correction. That was kind of what I was trying to steer us away from even in the beginning. It's like, well, it doesn't sound right. It's got too many words, or I don't like the look of it. It looked at me the wrong way. It's like, what the F are you talking about? And so to me, read that post. I think it's a nice little post. And again, I would encourage you guys, maybe even Google some of the old GMAT tips of the week. I don't know if you can, probably could search for them in the blog as well. But and by the way, I sent you guys all a great, as I would say myself, video series last week with a lot of, a nice little blog post attached to them, I suppose. So digest them. Lots to learn on that Veritas blog. Not as updated anymore. More it's admission stuff now, but whatevs. All right, with that then, let's get into this question here. I do have all 5 answers on the board, but 97% of you did say something was wrong with this. Oh man, I love it, Natalie. There we go. That's what I love to see. That tells me you freaking read it and you watched it. So here's what I would say to you. Let's go back on this for a second. It says published since 1851. That's obviously a participial modifier. Everybody should know that. If not, log off now. Stop wasting your time and my time. Question though, not what is being modified, but what should be modified here, folks, by this published since 1851? What makes sense? I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm a little bit disappointed no one said the failing New York Times today. I don't know if anybody watched any of the confirmation hearings to start, but today's a very, very political day of sorts. So, but yes, it is the New York Times, not the Founders. So choice A has got to be out immediately. Like, to me, if I saw that, missed opportunity. Exactly, dude. You guys are off your game today, man. I would say to you, choice A is a bust. Is choice B any better? Not really. You're just putting the guys' names in there. And again, this is one of those situations where I say published since, published since, published since. I've got the setup for errors to be reproduced. And choice A and B, they did it immediately. Choice C at least says the time, so this stays. It doesn't mean it's right, it stays. Then I look, and that's fair, Francis. I look at choice D. It says the New York Times, blah, blah, so it doesn't have the same error. So then I look at choice E, it says the Founders being, okay, it's a different one. So now I start back all over again. So now I come back to choice C here. And by the way, it's like 90% of us are in the C through E world, which is good. This is where you should all be. It is a problem for me if you're in the A-B world. That's easy shit. So now let's look at choice C here. It says, published since 1851, the Times was founded by George Jones, who had no previous journalism experience, and Henry Jarvis Raymond. Again, looks fine to me. But what issue did you have with it that you eliminated it in this case? Because I know a lot of people did not even touch this. So even here, you, Francis. Yeah, Carl, if what you're saying, and again, I got to be a mind reader of sorts, is you're saying, hey, look, they kind of split these guys on me. Yeah, Jacob, Molly, Tony, yeah, David, Gurpreet, we got to pay closer attention. Wrong question, Lisa. What the hell's going on here, guys? Oh my God. Rayshawn, are you studying with Gurpreet over there? All right, so let's rewind back. No wonder you guys aren't even seeing. No wonder, maybe Jonathan, that's the reason why no one said the failing New York Times. It's a missed opportunity because no one's fucking doing the right question here today. Oy, I need a break. What is it? Is it 5:05? All right, we'll break in another few minutes. So let's rewind back. Are we doing this question here? Now, Kylie asks a great, oh, there we go. Kylie asks a great question here. And Jason has a great response of sorts. So let's rewind back on this and start trying to figure this out. I think some of you are saying right now, hey, it changed the meaning of the sentence. Like the original had both people who lacked the experience, so like choice C changed the meaning of it. And I would say, what effing meaning are you talking about? When did you talk to the guy who wrote this sentence? You didn't. And so if you didn't, then you have no business talking about the change in meaning there. Because again, if we start to look at this, I want to start talking like a lawyer with you for a second. When I look at this original sentence, I'm going to walk into court right now and I'm going to say, Your Honor, they both lacked experience on this. And let's say in this case, my good friend Jake on the other side of the bar, he decides to come and he's like, no. If you wanted them both to lack experience, counselor, why the F did you not do a good job and draft it saying who both had no experience? And I'd be like, listen, Jake, I know you're a lawyer too, but really, if you wanted just one guy to have experience, you be... Listen, IT man, don't start going who and whom on me. This is a subject of a verb. It's got to stay who. But I like the way you're thinking, but wrong. So the one thing I would say is then if you really wanted him to only lack experience, you should have put his name first. And then it would have been crystal clear. And so right now the judge is going to listen to me and Jake argue, and the judge is going to get so sick of both of us talking so much, he's going to say, both you guys are idiots. Both of you need to learn how to draft a better contract. Go out into the hallway, fix your shit, then come back in. And so Kylie is correct. If you look in choice C, no one's going to argue. Exactly, Jake. Nice. Then we look at choice C here, and we look at choice C and we say, hey, like we can't argue anymore. Like choice C is air freaking tight. It's unambiguous. Like if you look at choice C, no one can argue they both lacked experience. It's crystal clear that only one guy lacked experience. And because that clarity is there, whereas this was not clear, as Jason kind of said, hey, maybe the F up is right then and there, I'm starting to love you, choice C. But again, I'm not ready to pick you because I respect you, which by the way, I hope you guys saw that girl, you know, the girl who crushed the test and got like a 750. Fake news. Too late, Molly. You had a chance to call this failing New York Times. Ding one for you. A one ding? I don't know how to say it. But either way, when I look at choice C here, and remember what that girl was saying, the girl who got like a 750, she could hear, she was saying the same shit during her practice test. I love it. So I love you, choice C, but again, I'm going to respect you. I'm going to move this and check out the other options, make sure I'm not rushing into this. Choice D. The Times was founded by Henry Jarvis Raymond and George Jones, who had no experience. So again, I've got a problem with the who had the experience. All right, there we go, Molly, the nice. And then I hope it wasn't my boy, although you told me he's still on paternity leave, right? Well, that's a different story. All right, so then, and published since 1851. And if you notice here, what we got, that's a dangling modifier. Oh, there we go. He's back. Molly works with another guy who was an old student of mine. And it says, and published since 1851. That's a dangling modifier, guys. And if that's a dangling modifier, you should say, there we go, Natalie. That's good. When you look at this, you should be saying to yourself, like, hey, what does this modify? In theory, it's modifying the Times. Why is it so far out there? It doesn't make sense at all. Now, some of you may be saying, well, wait a minute. Can't I argue that the Times was founded and published? You can argue whatever the F you want. But you can't be saying was published since 1851, because since means it started in the past and it continues into the present. So that would have to look more like has been published. So the tense is going to be off if even that's the straw you want to try to grasp. So I want no part of that. Choice E, the founders being Henry Jarvis, Raymond, George Jones. Now I'm not even sure that being makes sense, because being requires it to be some sort of ongoing condition. I'm not sure that's the case. Not that being is wrong. Some people will look at being and be like, oh, I knew it was wrong immediately. That's stupid. There are cases where being is a good way to do it. But again, I have some issues down the road here with who actually lacked the experience. Not to mention, hey, at least they fixed this part. But not to mention, like, where's this connection here? Like, there's no connector between those two clauses anyhow. So even choice E is, to quote Natalie here, a dog shit answer. So to me, I say, yeah, choice C. Again, I don't need to love you, but I certainly like you more than I do 4 other options here. I'm happy to take that and go with it here. So I think it's important to realize that. Yes, it is Thank the Test Maker for sure. Rayshawn doesn't even notice the difference, but still nails it. That's what I'm talking about, man. All right, with that then, let's go ahead and take a look at this last question here, and then we'll take our first break. This is an easy one. Let's put a minute and a half on the clock. Again, use decision points to bail you out. It makes your job easy. Minute and a half on the clock. Let's knock this out, and we'll get into our first break. All right, so I love the question and the quote of the day. So let's start with the quote of the day. Huge win, in my opinion, because Homegirl took our first practice test. That's a celebratory cause in my world. Because again, that means you finally took your head out of your ass or out of the ground or wherever the rest of the people are keeping it and decided to do something about your fate, face your maker of sorts, in this case the test maker, and realize what you're up against. Who cares? Who effing cares? Again, hopefully, as you saw in that scintillating 9 for 99 series, there's the one video I did on practice tests. You realize practice tests doesn't even matter about the scores. It's about what you learn from it, activity and achievement. So at least if I can walk away from that practice test going, damn, I just learned that A can be correct and it's the same as the original, that's a win. I hope you would have won more than that. I'm sure you did, but I want to get that out of the way. Now, to the question that was asked, and so what's the takeaway there? If any of you idiots have still not taken a practice test, what the F are you waiting for? That would be my comment. Now, moving my way up to the question that was asked, I think that's a great question. I think that's a good way to handle it. Not a great way. It's a better way than not writing it out and then just doing all this shit in your head because you think you can see all these choices clearly. You can't. You're taking a class from me. Remember that. So dumb it down. There's no shame to doing it. Writing ABCD out is fine. I just think it's time consuming. So what would I recommend? Well, what I try to teach my students to do in the rule is to basically, I'll do it right here real quickly, is to kind of grid it out. And so you basically write A, B, C, D, E down. No, don't do that. Do as I say, not as I do. I don't want you getting. I don't want to call the customer service straight from the test center going, your idiot instructor told me I could write on the monitor, and then and I just got my file flagged. I want my money back, and who do I sue? No, definitely don't do that. So the one thing that I would say to you is use your scratch pad. And by the way, you know, hopefully you guys saw also to erase. No, you're not allowed to erase, Stephen. You're not allowed to erase. In fact, that could be a cheating violation or a testing violation. You're supposed to raise your hand. And actually, hopefully you guys saw that email also from that other girl who got like the 710, and she's hungry. She knows she could do better. And what was her problem? She writes too damn big. She writes like my freaking 5-year-old does. Like, what the hell? So what was my advice to her? Learn to write small. I mean, these aren't rocket science type tips. And also the second piece of advice I gave her was raise your hand when you're about 2 or 3 pages to the end. You got to always account for delays in everybody else in the test center. So at least by the time that person comes, they could swap out your pad and so on. But what I would recommend you do is more like a gridding system like this, so that there's a little bit of economy of scale, so to speak. I don't have the time to write A, B, C, D every single time. I certainly wouldn't write it horizontally because the options are all vertically anyhow. And then if I write a few and then write A, B, C, D, E and write a few more, and then if I start to do timing style on it, so typically 11 questions should run you about 20 minutes, but figure out whatever pacing you want to try to accomplish. And this ain't even just for sentence correction. I'd say it's the same for all of verbal. And the one thing I would say to you is start to develop some sort of system or shorthand. Like for me, what I try to teach my students to do is like, all right, if I know something is right, but again, I'm going to respect it, I just give myself a check mark. If I think something is wrong, I'll give it a single slash. If I know something is wrong, it'll be a double slash. If I have no effing clue, then it's a question mark. And so maybe let's just say here, this is my hypothetical setup. Well, if you notice, I'm never coming back to C and E in my analysis. I knew it was wrong. I think A was right. Hell, I knew it was right, so to speak. But B and D, if I'm pressed for time, I ain't even looking at B because I was pretty sure B was wrong. I might look back at D because I respect it enough where I didn't even have the know-how to say I thought it was wrong. And then if I look at D and it still doesn't speak to me, then yeah, I'm picking choice A. So good question being asked. This is what I would recommend. But again, the beauty of taking a course like this, doing homework every effing week, taking a practice test every week, you figure out what works for you. And you tweak and you go as needed. All right, with that then, let's take a look at this question. No one touched choice E, which was good. It was a bad answer, clearly in a positive phrase modifier. What noun is it modifying? No clue. Are there other problems? Of course there are, but I don't need to touch them. Deep, more deep versus deeper, 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 deeper. Like again, if I didn't see that, I don't care. But a quick vertical scan of this tells me, hey, that's all comparative properly, this not so much. So yeah, definitely wrong. But I'm in the A through D world. These are relative phrase modifiers. You know those are the strictest of the bunch. They have to be touching the noun that they're modifying. Suggesting as a participial modifier, this is just a verb. And that should be a problem here. Because to me, choice C is what I will call a POS option of sorts. PSO, you know what. And the reason for it is because it is an ROS, which is a run-on sentence. We cannot, under any circumstances, pick run-on sentences as good answers. Run-on sentences are low-level grammatical mistakes we cannot afford to make. Remember what a run-on sentence is. You just have no conjunctions. You just keep talking and talking and talking. Like my 5-year-old does not come up for air. You give her a sentence to write or to speak and it'll last 3-4 minutes long because that's the way they roll. When you look at a sentence here and it says the report was bleaker, I don't have a problem if you say comma suggests, but you got to end that, and you never do. So to me, choice C should have died a pretty quick death. The fact that 4 of these answers were modifiers and this one wasn't should have concerned me, but at the same time, you know, which of these is unlike the other tends to be right, so as a result, maybe you could have said, oh, I shouldn't have had a modifier, I should have this, but yeah, C is a busted answer and the least popular one on the board. So really it's about A, B, or D. The relative modifier being in the mix, I got to ask myself, what's the noun that it's modifying? First of all, it ain't next to no noun. Secondly, there's quite a few nouns. There's the Fed, the report, Congress. I have no clue what it's referring to. Now, are there other issues in play here? Yeah. Think about what we got going on, even to the comparative tip. Deeper, more prolonged, then what? Than the analysts have predicted, or is it than that predicted by the analysts? What makes logical sense? So to me, choice A, which a decent number of picks, starts to be a double fail of sorts. And thus, even if I'm flirting with it, I would have picked choice B. But I still don't even like choice B because I don't know what noun's referring to. So what am I stuck with here? Ugh, hey, damn, dude. This is going to be a mess. Here we go. I am stuck with choice D here, suggesting that the nearing recession might be deeper and more prolonged than that predicted by even the most pessimistic analysts. Do I love it? No, because I don't know what suggesting is referring to. Who cares? Remember how participial modifiers operate. Participial modifiers can come at the end of a sentence and can modify either the noun that's before it or the noun of the subject of the sentence. And in this case, yeah, it is the report that's suggesting all this stuff. Best answer for sure. But maybe it didn't feel right. Again, who cares about your feelings? This is part of the misdirection I think that starts to occur. They manage to give you stuff that makes you uncomfortable enough to maybe want to pick something else which feels a whole lot better, but has other violations that are more glaring in nature that in an ideal world you're starting to recognize moving forward. All right, with that then, I want to wrap up this section here in the world of modifiers. Next up is the world of pronouns. I'll throw this up as a little bit of halftime entertainment. Let's take 5, then let's get back to work. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get back into this next section here in the world of pronouns. Remember, pronouns have two simple rules. Got to have a clear referent. They have to agree, meaning singular, plural, singular, singular, plural, plural, and of course I got to know who I'm talking about. That's it. Quickest way to fix a pronoun error is to remove the pronoun altogether typically, so just something to keep in mind. With that then, let's take a look at this sentence here. I think it's a great sentence. Again, a very decision points friendly sentence. You want to start to put that into play any chance you get. Let's put minute 45 on this one. Let's knock this one out. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question. Before I do, I want to comment on what I've dubbed some new and improved real quotes of the day. And it's almost like the perfect timing that I got kind of both of these, because they really are from almost opposite ends of the planet. The first is from someone who's saying, I just got to get over this whole "it sounds good to me" test. And it's a smart move to get over it. When I had asked how this girl did on her skill builder, she said she got a 64 on the quiz. Again, I say this with all due respect, as they say, but anybody getting a 64 on this quiz has no business at all saying, oh yeah, this sounds good to me. You got a freaking 64 on the quiz. Like guys who get like 90 somethings or 100, we typically don't even go with the "it sounds good to me" test. If you're in the 60s, what the F? So again, I want to make sure that gets heard loudly and clearly to start. Now what I love about the second comment is it's from some guy who's just killing things in here. Not that things have been terribly tough to start, of course, but still, it's definitely a step in the right direction given Homeboy got his ass handed to him last Wednesday. And I, of course, was part of that process, handing it to him via private chat, because this guy seems motivated and hungry to get after what he wants, but is clearly not on the path to doing so. And I'm so glad to see that there's no repeat occurrence, so to speak, a week later. Now, granted, Wednesday was quant, today it's verbal, but the point is still the same. Come to class prepared. And he did it, and I love it. And again, the proof's in the pudding, as they say. Remember, we were at the halfway point last Wednesday. Tomorrow, we're 2/3 of the way done. Again, this moves so quickly, so don't keep putting off to tomorrow what you can do today, as they say. You really want to make sure you're getting the most you can out of this, and it just starts with solid preparation. Yeah, for sure, man. And you know, it's like, but this is sort of the thing that I warned you guys of even before you walked through the door. So no one can ever accuse me of not telling it straight. All right, with that then, I want to take a look at this question here. And I think, you know, then we never finish this course, but I agree, this could easily be a 12-week course. Shit, it could be a 4 nights a week course. But let's be honest, you guys would get sick of me way earlier than we already have, I suppose. Now, the only thing I want to say about this sentence, and this is where you're going to start to see these sentences suck, is a lot of this shit is repetitive in a big way, to the point where it becomes very challenging at times to focus in on what matters. Like if you noticed on this sentence, just from, again, a vertical scan, a lot of this language was exactly the same thing. For employees about contacting, ignore it. A lot of this language is the same on the back end. Ignore it. And so your job is really to focus in on half a dozen words potentially. And that's it. Like, think about this. If they had only chosen to underline this portion and nothing more, think about how much easier this question was. I gave you a minute 45, I think, on this one. That could turn into more like a 45-second question. But, you know, to Jason's comment earlier and even to Megan's, it's like the test maker loves to waste time, loves to waste your time, loves to get you into these little traps where you're just sitting there in sort of a, you know, golfing style sand trap of sorts. You don't want to be there. And part of the decision points process will allow you to just kind of go, hey, it's all the same. Ignore it, move on. I'm praying that none of you are sitting here marking up your little exercise books or your, you know, the hard copy books or whatever it is that you guys are following along on sometimes, because you can't do that on test day. Again, you can't be writing on the screen. I encourage you guys to grid, as I was trying to show you what I teach my students to do. But to me, I can't be doing what I'm doing here. So again, it's just starting to train yourself to ignore it. So knowing that this is what's in play, start to notice what's being tested here. Hey, I think that's solid, Natalie. It's so funny you say that. Again, some of this stuff is common sense. I love that you're starting to recognize that now. Practice the way you're going to be playing. And by the way, if you still don't know what the test is all about in some sense, I would say go drive to the nearest test center. I mean, assuming it's in relatively short proximity to you, you don't got to fly to another city. Dude, I don't understand why I wouldn't go there this weekend and just to check it out. Like, again, start to defang some of the anxiety that exists in the process. And if you start to see how sterile and sad those environments are, you start to realize like half the stuff that I do, you know, taking the practice test and underneath my comforter with my foot up and a cocktail in the other hand in my bed with my dog next to me, you ain't doing that on test day, guys. So start to be realistic. But to that point, I just want to make sure you start to see here, when you look at these options, what's being tested. This is that classic example of note the signs. So in here, you got pronoun in the mix. Okay. Pronoun in the mix. Okay. Relative modifier, potentially. Relative modifier. Pronoun. 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 So clearly there are pronouns. Oh, man. How... These are all business plans that we're going to work on later. Don't steal my money or my idea, Francis. As they say, idea is worth exactly what you pay for them. Jack shit. So as you look at this, no, definitely not. Molly, you're hilarious. So the one thing I want to make sure is if you notice, they didn't go singular v plural on this. What they have in this particular case is just a clear reference issue. You got to know who they're referring to. And given that in choice A, I've got managers as well as employees before the they that's existing there, I'll say I have no clue at all who they're referring to. And thus choice A is dead on arrival. Why did anybody pick it? That's a fail. Now, on that note, if I look at this and I say anytime I see these two plural nouns before the pronoun, I would say that's a problem down the road as well. So I look at choice B. Here it's got a pronoun, but it's before the managers, after the employees. I think that's okay. Choice C, it's got no pronoun. That's okay. Choice D, it's got a plural pronoun here after the managers, after the employees. I'm killing you. Choice E, it's a double whammy. I'm killing you. Like if I look at this and I'm down to choices B and C because I understand that the pronouns here have no referent issues if there's a pronoun at all, I can live with that all day long. But now, again, if I don't know the difference between the two, that's okay to me. Like this is where I want you to understand, maybe for the first time and only time in this course, I'm willing to give free passes for not having things instantly recognizable because sentence correction's tough. That's where context is so important. Answers being assets, the decision points process makes it easy. So then if you choose not to use those tools to make it so, then you deserve to struggle. But your first impression that this is tough, I can live with it. But we are giving you the tools you need to now just dismantle this. So now when I look at choice B, it says their managers out of the office. Choice C says managers who are out of the office. So clearly who is a relative modifier. This is just a prepositional modifier. So what are they modifying? I don't know. In choice B, it is next to the managers, so maybe the managers are out of the office. But maybe, just maybe, the employees are out of the office and they're contacting their managers. Like, I could argue that. In which case then, this isn't super clear. Whereas when I have a relative modifier there, I'm not really at liberty to start arguing all these alternative interpretations. Like when I have that relative modifier there, it fixes me to the noun that it's next to. So it is the managers who are out of the office. So yeah, you know what, choice C, no ambiguity. I'll pick you all day long and run with you. Again, I'm not sitting there saying, hey, what sounds good to me? I have no business doing that. Now, to that point, you know, I threw in that quote of the day earlier from some girl who's doing really well in here. But again, it's not because she's doing everything we're doing. She's just kind of, I don't want to say lucking her way to it, but kind of just getting to where she needs to be eventually. Remember, and I've had students like this before, and I'll comment again on it. Like if you're one of these types who can just close your eyes, put your finger on the screen, knock this out, just you be you. I don't want to change a damn thing. Like you don't go through this analysis. You shouldn't. There's no point to do so. Vast majority in here aren't able to do that. And if that's the case, then it is important we start to figure this stuff out from the beginning on how to do it right. Not just half-ass our way till we get to the average or to the average questions or even the tough questions, and then we stop and knock ourselves out. And then we say, oh shit, we can't do them. And then we have to start to learn it. Better to learn it from the get-go and have it be a much more consistent approach. All right, how about this guy here? A much shorter question. I'd argue it's even easier. Let's get aggressive on this. Let's put a minute on the clock. Let's use decision points to help us, folks. Clearly, more time is required when there's a lot more around. Although on the last question, you didn't need all that time if you start to tune a lot of that nonsense out. Let's put a minute on. Let's do this right. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look at this question here. So question for you. When you saw this, what did you decide was the clue up top that told you which direction to take this entire sentence in? What did you pick up on that said, boom, how did I not see this? I wish everybody saw it. Yeah, be careful. You know, I really want to get to that it's aspect to it. You know, I'm not sure that even today does anything for me, Vivian, but you're killing today's lesson, so maybe it does something that I'm missing. Like, notice here, this is all plural. This is singular. I clearly got a plural v singular path that I got to be worried about. Like, it's so important I find the clue that tells me that. And when I see this pronoun, which is fixed, I cannot change it. It's also outside the underline, which means it's grammatically 100% correct. Then I'm stuck wondering, what's it referring to? I don't give two shits how nice any of these sound to you. They're automatically out. Automatically. Because it will not agree with the pronoun that is already supplied. So sometimes they're going to ask you to fix or to adjust the pronoun they've given you. Sometimes they're going to ask you to pick a noun to work with. It's still testing the same thing. It's just this is a little bit more subtle. So either way now, I know I need a singular noun up in here. And again, I do not care when you look at D&E and you're like, I don't know which way to go. The only thing I ask that you do is not put your head down, pray to the almighty GMAT gods, and roll the dice and pick something. That's a shitty way to go. Again, it's not one that's going to carry you far in the long run. Instead, you got a playoff system. Your job is now to figure out why is one opponent better than the other. And analyze it in essence. And to me, it's just look at the damn choices and see what the hell's different. And there's only one word that's different between the two. So I just got to stop and I got to say, hey, do I need that word species or not? That's it, plain and simple. Does it make logical sense? Or is it redundant? Because when I look up here and I see that its path is there, I realize that a path doesn't belong to species. A path belongs to a lion. You know, in this particular case, a lion suggesting of all the lines anyhow. So choice D, best answer on the board. And most of you guys got there, which is good. But if you're in E, I'd say, hey, it's I would say to you that you are a close sucker answer, but close. And I think that's the real key here. You know, in this case, Molly, I don't have you know, when you say would you choose C, I'd say to you, first of all, you know, it's like I say, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. Like, these are hypothetical situations that aren't worth engaging in. That's not even, you know, think like the test maker is obviously important, but that's not even think like the test maker type scenario. Jason. Fair enough. So to stem off any complaints to Veritas customer service, Jason will phone it in for us. The only thing I would say to you is, remember, there are 1,000,001 ways to say anything that's correct. 1,000,001 ways. And so to me, that's not what it's about. It's just always looking to find what you know to be wrong, killing it, and moving on. I could tell you right now, there will never be two correct answers. And partly why, in the world of critical reasoning, I say to you guys, hey, if answers smell the same, they stink. It's impossible. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right. With that, then, I want to bring us to what I would argue is our first tough question of the day. Now, you might say to me, that's bullshit. We already got 50% on one question. Isn't that a tough one? I'd say to you, yeah, I guess. But I truly think this is the first tough question of the day, and we might even do better than 50%. I don't know. But the reason I think this is a tough question is because it's sort of shiv-worthy, meaning it's going to fool you into thinking you're doing a good job on it. So if you're not acutely aware of what the #1 sucker answer is going to be on this question, you are sadly in it or worse. And there are some shit answers on this question I want nobody touching. This should come down to the right answer and the sucker answer. It probably won't, but I challenge you to prove me wrong. So as we go to town on this question, keep in mind what you need to have on all these questions. And it's fundamentally a concept of respect. Let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, let's go ahead and take a crack at this question, guys. So here's the kicker on this. We're back in the 50s, as, again, to be expected of sorts, but it's a high 50s, so this is easier now in retrospect than the World War I question. But here's what I know, or here's what I suspect. A good 80% of you thought you probably answered the question correctly. I don't think that's what happened in World War I. So let's look back at this question and start trying to figure some things out. Now, I would argue in this question there are multiple doors with which you can start the journey. Just like in quant, I always ask you, hey, what's the easiest part of the puzzle first? Like, I do believe in the world of sentence correction, when there are so many different things being tested, you should be thinking the same thing. So if you notice here, I would say there's a his versus there as door number 1. I would say door number 2 is on account of, due to, because of, on account of, or because of. And then I would argue door number 3 as Bono's back injury, Bono and his back injury, Bono's back injury, Bono and his back injury, Bono and his back injury. And that's just from a scan of this. So question. What would you say is the door that I want to start with? 1, 2, or 3 here? It looks like Stephanie likes door number 1. Damn, a lot of you like door number 1. Here's what I'm going to say. The vast majority of you are 100% wrong. 100% wrong. And to Natalie's point, the one thing I would say, Natalie, is I don't want us to judge it based off where it will get us. I want us to judge it just based off what's easier to answer. So you are correct. It will work out in our favor, but I don't want that to be our analysis, because by then it's too late. So it's not even in retrospect. I want us to be able to see this at the start. Because when I look at this, this should be a no-brainer. Number 3 is where it's at. So question for you. Okay, good stuff. So let's rewind back on this. Question. When you look at door number 1, what is the clue that, actually let's rewind back on this. What's the sucker answer on this question, guys? Let's see here when we look at this. Well, what is the sucker answer that people are likely to pick on this one? Oh, Molly, what the hell is 4? Geez, that's a failing type. Type fail, even worse than my typing. So let's rewind back on this one. It is choice A here. So let's rewind back. What is the clue in the original sentence that tells you, now you're giving me numbers? What the hell? What is the clue in the original sentence that tells me which way to go with the his versus their, guys? Oh man, I think you gotta go study with Ray Sean. That's where it's at, apparently. Yes. So I love that you guys are saying few, guys, because you are 100% correct. But here's the kicker. That's not what a lot of people are picking right now, unfortunately. And this is what kills me on this test. I've got close to 40% of you, 40% right now, going with, no, what are these fools talking about? This was about John, who's singular, was singular, one was singular. How the hell are they not an A, D, or E? Because it's not about John. And to me, this is what I want you guys to start to think about as you go through this. You need to appreciate here that the wording is modifying people. People are plural. If you weren't sure about that, the word few also suggests pluralness. So to me, choice A dead, choice D dead, choice E dead. But here's the kicker. Some of you may be looking at my little door analysis here and thinking to yourselves, I did this the wrong way. Meaning, I've totally missed door number 0 maybe with the 2 versus the who. And I would say to you, I didn't really miss it. It's just that I'm not really trained to do anything about that. Like, I know that's a prepositional modifier. I know it's a relative modifier. I know relative modifiers are really tight when they're touching the noun that they're next to. But beyond that, I got nothing for you. So I can't tell you, oh, you should use this instead of that. So if that's the case, there's no reason that I'm going to jump into some of this shit. And that's what some of you did. You doubled down in a big way. Maybe you doubled down and it was too late to kind of back up on it. Because I want to go back to this third door. Some of you who are killing it here today, as I looked at some of you who commented, oh yeah, door number 3, you're on the same wavelength as me at this point. Because you're going for the easy stuff. Like, in retrospect, you should be thinking to yourself, there's no way in hell 2 things are causing the delay of a tour. It doesn't make logical sense. And if I can establish that, there'd be absolutely 0 chance I would have ever touched D and E, or even B for that matter. So I'm okay if I'm down to A versus C. I really am. I think that's where people should be immediately. I'm not touching the his versus there. It's a difficult decision to make. But on this one, when I look at that, that's just logic, folks. And so if I'm in the DE world especially, this is now like a double fail. Because not only did I F that up, but I got a little bit too smug on the front end and didn't respect this enough. Again, what did I think was going to be the sucker here? Doesn't make sense at all. So now if I'm at the AC world, I get it. Choice C, best answer for sure. And this is part of that misdirection that occurs. They give you enough clues to have you go one way, and then as you start looking there, they jack you on the other. You want no part of that. Now, notice in the middle here, I'm not making a decision based off of that, because that's a tough decision to make, one that I'm not qualified to make. They say that because of is a better way to explain things. I say, what the F do I know? Don't touch it unless that's the last resort that I have. And in this case, that's all I want you to see here. No one is dumb in here unless they ask dumb questions, which I've already said before. And more importantly, if we're here and we're trying to learn, Tony, even though you throw that island shade at me sometimes, I still love you. All right, with that then, let's finish up the world of pronouns. After pronouns comes up into the world of agreement. Agreement is super straightforward. In my opinion, it is one of the 2 that you really have to master. Like, there is no reason, if you look at something like this, and you look at an agreement and you don't say it's your best friend, that's a problem. Like, I got to thank the GMAT gods anytime I get an agreement question, because it's just a gimme. It's like, just check the box and let me move on. Remember the rules, singular, singular, plural, plural, there's no exception to it. There are a number of ways they make your life more challenging. Typically it's with all the filler. So even here, you say the number of applicants to the top business schools are increasing every year. Sounds good. But notice what the problem is. The verb is right there. What's the subject? It ain't the schools. Why? Because it's an object. Object is never going to be the subject. It ain't the applicants. Why? It's an object. Object never going to be the subject. So instead I'm left with the number. The number are increasing. That doesn't sound right, because it isn't right. The number is singular. Thus that should be singular. And again, even if you didn't notice that, I don't care. Because you would always have one other option that would at least say is, and then you stop and say, why does one say are, why does one say is? And then when I go back to the skill builder in my brain, all within seconds, I say, oh yeah, one is singular, one is plural. Clearly this is testing me on agreement, not tense. They're both in the present tense. It's just an agreement issue. Let me figure out what the subject is. Like, that's the analysis that goes through your head when you're scanning those answer choices. If that is not the analysis going through your head, you're not doing this the right way. Again, I don't care if you're getting the right answer. When the shit gets tough, you need to have strategy. Without strategy, you're just kind of doggy paddling in the ocean there. And so to me, once I establish that and figure out, oh yeah, this is singular, boom, I need to do this the right way, it's got to be is. But listen how ugly that sounds. The number of applicants to the top business schools is increasing every year. And those of us that are hovering in those 60s on the quiz and we want to go with what sounds good to us, we'll say that doesn't sound good to us. Well, no shit. It doesn't sound good because you got a plural noun right next to a singular verb. We're not taught to do things that way. But that's not what this question's about. This is what you want to be on the acute lookout for. It's that misdirection, guys. All right, with that then, let's kind of take a look at this next strategy here. And several of you commented to me already, it's all about slash and burn. I love it because I think slash and burn is a key strategy to employ. I would argue it not only helps you in the world of sentence correction, but also going back to last week, reading comprehension too. Obviously, I taught you guys how to read like you drive. I would say to you, even using slash and burn as a strategy when reading allows you to trim a lot of the fluff. Because remember, it's all about details in those damn passages and no one cares about details. Well, what does slash and burn entail? Getting rid of a bunch of modifiers, which are details. So kill them. So how does it actually operate? There's basically 3 steps. Step 1 is eliminate all those details wholesale style, like if it comes in a modifying phrase setup, kill it in its entirety. So a recent research study of worldwide cellular penetration finds that there are now 1 mobile phone for every 2 people, more than twice as many than there were in 2005. Well, plenty of prepositional modifiers in the mix. Start to yank them all out. Then what's step 2? Break off the independent clauses. So in some sense, if the independent clause has no issue with it, kick it, focus your attention on the dependent clause. So here, notice, it says a study finds. So here's the subject. Here's the verb. I don't really have any issues with subject-verb here. Now let me focus my attention on the dependent clause bit. Step 3 is to now focus on the actual adjectives and adverbs. The idea there is that I've already killed all the modifiers wholesale style. Now I'm just focusing on the almost retail, like the single word modifiers. So now I'm left with ripping out the now, ripping out the mobile, adverb, adjective. There are 1 phone. There are 1 phone. Does that sound right? It shouldn't. Why doesn't it sound right? Because, first of all, this is the subject. Here is the verb. First of all, well, I guess now second of all, when you have subject-verb inversion, which is what this represents, remember this is in the skill builder too, you should, in my opinion, put it all back together. Do not have extra words left over though when you do that. So when I say that, I would say 1 phone are there. I would rewrite the sentence that way in my head, not on paper. And if I say 1 phone are there, that doesn't make sense because 1 phone is singular, are is plural. I got to change that to 1 phone is there. Thus, it should have read there is 1 phone. Again, I don't care if you didn't see that. For today only. Next week, it's more of a problem. But when you look at this, the best part is you'd have 1 other option that would say is. So again, 1 says are, 1 says is, and you say to yourself, why does 1 say are? Why does 1 say is? And then realize, oh yeah, it's just testing you on agreement. That's slash and burn in a nutshell. But notice, again, you're not actually physically eliminating, you're just ignoring those words. It says, but you can always recycle if you've gone too far. So what does that really mean? I think it means if you don't have any errors that are present once you've done all your slash and burn it, put it back, look for something else. That's all really. All right. With that, then I want to take a look at this next sentence. I think it's a great sentence. It's so decision points friendly. It's so slash and burn friendly. And that's the way, if you start to take a sentence that might, on first impression, overwhelm you, like look at the freaking font on this. It could be already sort of demoralizing to see it and say, man, I got 2 minutes to do this or 1.5 minutes to do this. But if you can start to pay attention to what matters, using decision points, answers being asked, spending 5 seconds down here at most, and then, or at most slash desired, then when I get into this question, dude, it becomes so damn easy that you're like, oh man, that didn't even take me a minute. It's like, well, no shit, because you're using some strategy to get this done. It ain't about it, just accuracy. Accuracy is important. I ain't going to try to short sell you on that. Obviously, getting them right is the goal. But if I can't get them right with time, then who kind of cares? Efficiency is all important as well. So with that, let's put 2 on the clock and then we'll talk. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this next question here. Before I do, I want to comment on what I just dubbed the real quote of the day 3. I love it. It's a comment from one of you in here, which I think is so fair. And again, it's something that I want you to feel okay feeling. Remember, there's a reason that perhaps I'm up here teaching this and you're over there learning it. It's because you're not exactly here. And it's like, well, no shit. You're not supposed to be. But I do want some of these wheels turning some of the time on some of these questions. If they're not, that is a problem. I don't expect it on every single question, every single wheel, so on and so forth. But I will tell you something. A quick way to start to get there is really making sure your takeaways are rock solid. So in my email, midpoint that is, on Friday, reminding you of quite a few things here. A lot of people just go through motions with takeaways if they do them at all. A lot of times, if anything, they just memorize solutions, and it's real shitty. It won't help you. It's like that. I think it's like that girl that I was talking about. I feel like one of those emails was like, I was like, dude, this girl approaches every question like it's freaking brand new. It's like, you're an idiot. Like that many. Like there's no reason to go through that many questions ever. And you got to start to see how they're all the same damn thing. So to me, it just comes down to just being able to identify triggers and how to respond. So even here, as we go through some of these things, what we want to get acutely aware of is obviously the rules. Rules are important. I'm having conversations with some of you right now. It's like, yeah, I didn't quite do the skill builder. Okay. Am I shocked then that there's abysmal performances happening today? No. What I'm more shocked by is like, why are you still here? Like, just freaking log off. come back tomorrow stronger. Be like that other guy who's killing things here because he got his ass handed to him last week and he embarrassed himself and his family in the process. But if you have the content, but it's how do I respond? How do I respond quickly? That's where those takeaways become all important. Like, I can't keep doing the same thing with the same pacing every single question and then just saying like, oh, I'm never going to get there, or how am I ever going to get there? I've given you what you need to get there. You just got to now execute on it. All right, with that then, let's take a look at this question here. Question for you. What decision point would you start with on this question? This is a bit of an opinion, but it might be a fact if we can agree on it. I would think it's a fact, but what do you guys think on this one? What popped out to you? So here's what's interesting. You know, a lot of you are saying worry versus worries, which is my preferred starting place. Tony. But, you know, a lot of you are also saying have v has, and I'm hoping this is the have and has that you're talking about. I'm hoping that nobody is talking about the middle, have v has. If you are, like, what the F? Now, I don't even know what the hell the many is referring to here, Stephen, but at this point, that's okay, I guess. So let me ask you this question here. Because here's a kicker, by the way. Like, if you never saw the have v has in the middle, I wouldn't begrudge you. If you didn't even see the have v has after Acme Corp, I wouldn't begrudge you. If you did not see the worry v worries, I'd say get some new effing glasses. Like, how the hell do you not see this? The last few words, the first few words doesn't change in this case, so that doesn't matter either. But those last few words, very different. Worry versus worries, it's a gift from the GMAT gods. That's singular v plural. I just got to figure out what the subject is. So question, what is the word up top that tells me which direction it's supposed to head in? There's only one word that I got to see up here. What is that one word? Yeah, be careful, guys. Be careful. Oy. So let's rewind back for a second. Dude, we are dying here today on this. Dude, the hell no, James. Is that what they taught you at the public defender's office? Get out of here. So let's rewind back for a second here. If you look at this, here's what I want you guys to understand. This is the verb of the sentence, guys. Dude, I want to end class right now, and you might be in for another self-correction, Molly. Let's slow down for a second. So let's rewind back on this one. You guys gotta all Google later how to find subjects and verbs. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Everybody's got to see that's the verb of the sentence. Now the question is, what's the subject? Remember what I said earlier. It's imperative that you now write this like that one girl in huge font, so it takes up 3 scratch pad papers. An object in a sentence will never be the subject of the sentence. It's very important to understand that, because a lot of you guys are freaking calling out objects everywhere, and it's garbage on this sentence. So first off, remember slash and burn, which I said would be a very important strategy to employ here. Notice there's a prepositional modifier here with on retailer shelves. That means all that stuff gets tossed. That have recently arrived, relative modifier, gets tossed. And as a conjunction, I don't need to worry about that. Over the past year, prep modifier, tossed. That Acme Corp have developed, relative modifier, gets tossed. Of the new products, prepositional modifier, it gets tossed. All I'm left with is the quality. That's the subject, folks. Quality. Is quality singular or plural? Pro tip, when in doubt, always guess singular. Not that because they're always singular, but because when they give you nouns that are kind of confusing, chances are they're going to look pluralish and they'll probably be singular. And if you're wrong, again, don't come crying to me. You're a big boy. You're gambling at the casino. You can't ask for your money back from the pit boss when you lose. You should have known that shit to begin with. But if you're right, thank the lucky stars and then learn it. And if you're wrong, oh well, learn it. So in this case, the quality is singular. If it were plural, it should have an IES behind it. And thus I say, all right, I just need a singular verb now. It ain't A, it ain't B, it ain't C. You're instantly down to 50-50 D or E here. And again, 90% of you here, which is good. 10% of you up there, that is terrible. And again, I want to make sure we call a spade in here. It ain't going to get me, I'm on the road to the 510 if not. So when I look at this, what do I have left? Have and have. I don't even have to decide this dog anymore. And I think that's important because sometimes I might not have known how to do this guy in the middle. Who cares? The GMAT gods cooperated with me on this one. Now I just got to worry about the front end. Apparently I should have seen that. So even if I didn't, it's like when you were a kid and you had these like little, you're in the doctor's office and you're looking at like those magazines, like, hey, what's the difference between these two pictures? It's like all you just do is compare, contrast, compare, contrast. And so when you look at this, the only difference that's left right now is the has v have on this. I just got to figure out what the subject of that is. Well, the subject, who did the development? Acme Corp. Is Acme Corp singular or plural? I don't know. When in doubt, guess singular. But in this particular case, it is just a legal entity, one organization. Thus, it is singular. And thus, I would then choose choice D for the win. Now, rewind back. Look at the have there. We did not have to decide that. But question for you. What is the subject of that verb? Now it's not the subject of a sentence. So I can have it be an object. What is it that I want to make sure that I see on this guy? Okay, good. Well, now we're in agreement. It is products. I'm not getting a bunch of random ass subjects from you guys. Now, how do I know it's products? Because notice it's next to a relative modifier. That's a fail. Stress. Woman, if you think my class is stressful, you got to sit your ass at the test center. Like I'm a walk in the park compared to the test center, man. So the one thing I just want to make sure you see on this one is that relative modifier. I cannot do that. I know the relative modifier needs to be touching a noun. And then, Pew, I haven't heard from you in like 4 weeks. Now you're talking about stress? What the hell? So the one thing that I would say to you guys is pay attention to that, to the relative modifier. Notice it ain't touching it. The only way that could fly is if somewhere earlier in the sentence it's touching it. And sure enough, it's right there. So what's it touching? The products. That tells me, yeah, it's the products that have to be modified there. And plus, it makes logical sense. What arrives on a shelf? It ain't quality. It is product. So, of course, it works. All right. With that, then, I want to take a look at our second tough question of the day here. It may not even seem like a tough question. It's a tough one. Respect it. Now, the polls are going to lie on this one. Many of you are going to get this right. But that's because I don't think it's as good a question as it could possibly be. Because if I were writing this, I would do it in a way to screw you further. Respect it, folks. Start with the stuff that's easy, then worry about the stuff that's tough. Let's put 2 on. Let's knock this out. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this question here. Love the comment that just came my way. Again, if you're not starting to already make your life a whole lot easier, what the hell are you waiting for? Now, question for you. I would argue there are two doors on this question, door 1 and door 2. Door 1 is the have, V, has at the front, door 2 being the creation aspect on the back end. Everything else is the same. Where do I start this journey? Door 1 or door 2 here? Let's make sure we agree. This is a fact. This is not an opinion. So apparently it is an opinion. What the hell's the matter with you guys? And here's what kills me. Some of you guys are killing it today, but you're telling me the wrong door, so I'm not happy. Even if it's easy for you, it's still a shitty door to go down. So let's start with this. Question for you. In door number 1, what is the subject of door number 1 here? A lot of you love you some door number 1. Let's see what we can come up with here. What is the subject of door number 1? Lisa, I appreciate the honesty here. That's why you said door number 2. You're a woman after my own heart. I love it. That's where you should be. Exactly, Gurpreet. So notice here, and Tom, this is why I didn't want to put you on blast, Tom, but Tom, you've been killing things today, and you correctly answered the door earlier, but you did not do it right on this one, although you are correct and you probably got this question right. Notice how many of you said pride. Pride is definitely not the subject. Even region is not the subject. It is indeed a committee, and this is what this question this is what partially makes this question so tricky on this one. So let's rewind back. Remember what I said earlier. I can never have an object in a sentence be the subject of a sentence. And so in this case, notice I have a prepositional modifying phrase. In the region's pre-automotive achievements. And be careful, pre-automotive is a modifier here. So that's definitely not going to be a noun, that's going to be modifying. What achievements? The pre-automotive ones. But which pre-automotive ones? The ones in the region. So these are all just modifier after modifier after modifiers. All that shit gets slashed and burned. The most, okay, whew, all right, I just want to make sure. I don't know anymore, I get worried. So the one thing that I would say is, out of a growing pride, the question then becomes, well, is it pride? And it's like, no, it can't be pride. Notice we have freaking prepositions at the front end as well. Prepositional modifier, object never going to be the subject of a sentence. So now I'm effed. I can't find the subject, as one of you even said. And it's like, well, I know, because the subject ain't in front. This is classic subject-verb inversion, where the subject comes after the verb. Well, if that's the case, break it up and put it back in front of where it should be. And that's where Tom and a few others correctly pointed out that it is a committee. But very few of you saw that. And again, that's what makes this tough. But here's the best part. A lot of you guys got this question right, but you got lucky. Broken clock right twice a day. Oh, pride is singular, so I'll guess singular. Well, that doesn't mean we did it the right way. This sentence is so jacked up that I think to Jacob's comment, like that Yoda speak-ish, I think that's kind of fair. You know, whenever you have this inversion, they kind of F you with it. So what it should really sound like is, out of a growing pride in the region's pre-automotive achievements, a committee has developed blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, exactly. Well, I'd say it's not poorly worded. It is just a complicated statement. And so in this particular case, if I know committee is singular, great. If I don't, I guess it. Always singular. But what should I be taking away from this? Remember there are collective nouns in the mix where they refer to a bunch of people and it really refers to just one singular quantity. For example, unit, band, squad, audience, mob, crowd. You know, these are all team, group. Like, these all refer to more than one person, but it is treated as a singular subject. So you got to believe, guaranteed, this comes down to B versus C. But that's not where I would have started this journey. When in doubt, stay single. That's good, Gurpreet. Although I don't know if that's, well, I guess that's just probably good advice. That's good I might have to steal that from you. That's good dating advice and good GMAT advice, potentially. So in this case, what you have in front of you, I don't think should have been here. I would have been in door number 2 with Gurpreet, with Lisa and the rest of you, because I think it's just easier. Because you could say, hey, what is out there creating all these monuments and museums? It ain't the artifacts. But notice how every single one has artifacts. Does that mean there's an error here? Not necessarily. Because if you think about it, what you're looking for that's doing all those creations, a committee. Committee we've decided is singular as well. And thus, in this case, I realize choice B is the right answer. But I would have started there and I would have come to B and D on this one. But to that point, let's go back and rewind. Remember, a relative modifier has to be next to the noun that it's modifying. Is it next to the noun that it's modifying? Clearly not. So what is separating the noun that it's modifying and the relative modifier? Well, notice here, for the preservation, prepositional modifier, of Detroit's landmarks and artifacts, prepositional modifier. If I slash and burn all these extra modifiers, like which committee? The one for the preservation. Preservation of what? Of the landmarks and artifacts. Like if I kill all that, then really I'm left with that, developed a committee that is creating. So here, the relative modifier is basically as close as it can possibly be to the committee. They just gave us a bunch of extra filler in there. That's all. And it does happen from time to time. Either way, for me, the bigger takeaway is, as a reminder, object, never the subject. Secondly, start with the damn easy door first. Stop making your life difficult. All right, that's all I want to say here, guys. I want to be done with this. Next up is the world of comparisons. I'll throw this up as a little halftime entertainment of sorts. There's only one question here. I've sent you guys a video on it, so I'm going to skip it anyhow. Plus, we're a little pressed for time today. Let's just throw a quick break on. I need to get something in my throat here. So let's put 5 on, and then we'll just come back in. So wait, I'll just throw this question up if you want. You know, you got to keep them logical, got to keep them equivalent. I'll throw this question up, but I already sent you guys a video on it, so we're going to just roll right into the next question after. But if you feel like doing it, do it now during the break. Let's talk when the break is up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this next section here. Again, watch the video or read the book as needed for that question. I want to get into tense here. Tense is good stuff. Oh, and by the way, I love the comment that just came my way during the break there. Again, just from someone who just gets it, man. All you need is approach. That's what this whole journey has been about. Again, if you're ever in doubt, hour one, day one, most important hour of the entire course. Again, not very interactive. But like I said, it is easily, hands down, the best. So with regard to tense, the one thing I would say to you is don't get too caught up with this stuff. Tense, I think, can be challenging if you're out there trying to find the perfect tense, or I should say the ideal tense, because perfect tenses are important as well, but the ideal tense. And thus, they suggest that maybe you should think of it as a timeline, and I think that's another way to think of it in a good way. And that's because as long as what you have in front of you makes logical sense from a timeline's perspective, that's good. Don't worry about the rest. Look for something else to focus your attention on. But then, if you can't focus your attention anywhere else, and you actually gotta kind of sit there and negotiate the minutia, then okay, you tried, deal with it. In my opinion, tense sucks. This is one of the categories that I would push off to the very end if I could. Part of it is because the skill builder lays out that chart for you, which is mind-boggling. And again, just to the point of that guy who is just like, dude, the skill builder can be challenging. You could spend minutes and minutes doing this shit. But if you're using those answers as assets and just looking to mine at any chance you get, again, it makes your job so much easier. So even here, just as a quick example, if you're to read this first sentence, it looks fine, it sounds fine. After meeting with Bill, John realized that he forgot to give him the proposal. No problems at all. I'm okay with it thus far. But the best part is the GMAT would never have that. The GMAT instead would say he forgot, and then they'd also say he had forgotten. And then the question would be, well, wait, why does one say he forgot? Why does one say he had forgotten? Like, what the heck's the difference? And it is at that moment, if you've crushed the skill builder, you stop and you say, well, I know the difference. This is simple past. This is past perfect, because it's got the helping verb to have in the past tense, along with the past participle, rendering that in the past perfect. If this is all Greek to you, go back to the damn skill builder. Now, which one should I use? Well, I remember from the skill builder, past tense is used when things happen before the now. Past perfect is used when it happened before the past itself. So the question then becomes, did the forgetting happen before the past? The past appears to be the realization. So when does forgetting occur with regard to realization? Forgetting happens before realization. Thus, holy cow, this was wrong. This is right. All right, glad I saw that. I didn't see it at first, but thank the strategy of decision points allowing me to see it now. Move right on. Like, that's what this is about. Like, even here, if you take a quick second, notice it says, in a school meeting, the principal demanded that students are quiet in class or face the consequences. It's a great sentence. I see no problems with it. Okay, who cares? Join the club. You will never see a sentence like that. Instead, you'd see another one that gives you one other option that would say that. R, B, what's the difference? This ain't now a true tense issue. This is now what they call a mood issue. And if you did the online skill part of the book, I don't think talks too much about it. Online definitely does. Like, this starts to render you into the world of the subjunctive. Why is that? Because, oh yeah, there are those bossy verbs. Like, when I start bossing people around with the verbs such as demand, I got to now conjugate it as if I'm issuing the command. And if I were the principal, I would never say, hey, are quiet. I would say, hey, be quiet. And thus, this is wrong, no matter how good it sounded. And even there, notice I didn't say if I was the principal. I was is how I would conjugate something, but I said I were. Why is that? Because hypotheticals also throw me into the subjunctive. So you start to realize there's certain weird kinks. And, you know, one of you was commenting to me a little bit ago, she's killing it. She's like, English is a jacked up language. It is. But just getting her head wrapped around some of these things. Because I'm telling you, it's about strategy above all else. Yeah, so I think that's fair. Strategy above all else. You got to know content. But where you're in an environment where you got to beat the timer to beat the test, you can't just sit there and cling to the content. It ain't going to get the job done quickly, folks. All right, with that, then I want to take a look at this sentence here. I think this is a good sentence. I think it's a relatively easy one. But again, start with the decision points that are simple. Then worry about the other stuff. Let's put minute 45 on. Let's knock this out. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. Most of you guys nailed this pretty nicely, so let me ask you this to start. What door did you guys start with on this one? I think it is so important to identify the easy doors to walk through. This one's a little bit of an opinion, but I'd like to think it's a fact. Let's see if we can agree on this one. So I guess we don't agree on this. Stephen, I would argue that I do think it is or v and. That's just me. But, you know, like I said, I'm okay with this being an opinion at this point. There are clearly some verbs on the back end over there. You know, they're all in some sort of perfect tense, whether it's the present perfect or past perfect, I don't know. But the or, v, and is where I would start. And again, it's not because it's going to actually eliminate a bunch of these options quickly. I don't know how many options it's going to eliminate when I first tackle it. I just tackle it because I think it's relatively easy to figure out. Do I want both or do I just need one? Is there redundancy there or not? Meaning when something is destroyed, isn't it by definition already structurally compromised, in which case A and C are unnecessary. 2-3 split, 2 gone. Even if I'm in the B, D, E world, I could live with it. Question then becomes, should it be in the past perfect or should it be in the present perfect? I don't know. Let me figure out on my timeline. Like, that's what you do. And if you got to dumb this down and write it out, I got no problems with that. Like, here is the now. Here is the fire in the past. And then, of course, the building had to come before the fire. So if the building is coming before the fire, it does make logical sense for it to be at a minimum somewhere in the past, and probably past perfect, but I don't need it because remember I could have a series of events that happens in the past and I could throw them all in the past without kind of differentiating with a perfect tense. So when I realized that the building definitely had to be at least in the past, choice D is dead, and I'm immediately down to B versus E on this one. These are the best answers in my opinion. They are also, hopefully, as you noticed, the same exactly worded answers. In which case there's a huge takeaway to get from that. And that is very simple. Anytime I have the same exact words in an option but in a different order, I guarantee you 100% money back that it is a modifier that's being tested. That's it. Something is not being modified correctly. So question, when you look at B and you look at E, what are the two words I should have been like, you're kind of weirdly placed. I need to pick up on that, because if I do, then it's very easy for me to stick the landing on this. And that's all. You gotta, and this is compare and contrast, folks. Yeah, very nice. You guys are saying, look, man, it's all about last year. What happened last year? I gotta know. When I look at choice B, it seems to be all about the fire. When I look at choice E, slash and burn tells me that I can kill this relative modifier, that I can kill this prepositional modifier, and thus I'm left with, hey, last year some of the homes had been built by the community's earliest settlers. That doesn't make a lot of sense, folks. Choice B, best answer on the board. And if you're in E, you're close. I got no problems with it. I think you just kind of got suckered at the last second there. When you talk about settlers, that suggests way before. That's all. All right. This is a simple question. This is straight. Yeah, awesome, Brandon, dude. Like so much of the, it's kind of like, obviously it was a tongue-in-cheek response to that super duper real quote of the day. It's like, what? Doing what I actually teach works? What the F? Who would have thought? But it's like, dude, I'm telling you right now, I think, again, to me, week 4 is, I think, maybe the best week in terms of just strategy, because it's like, even tomorrow is going to kick a lot of you guys in the face, knock a lot of teeth out. That's the reality. But if I can survive that and really get the strategy from tomorrow's lesson, because I have a really good understanding of underlying content, I think this week is like easily, dude, and you should be, and we'll end class soon. I think we're going long today, but I want to call it a day pretty soon. I think tomorrow's lesson is, like, again, part of the game-changing week that I think is week 4. All right, with that, let's just do this real quickly. I think it's a good question, just to really hammer home a little bit. Let's put a minute on the clock. Let's knock this guy out. Show some respect. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this question here. I will say this, no one really went for the sucker answer on this one. However, I've got dog shit answer on the board, and to me, why? So let's rewind back on this. No one's picking choice A, no one's picking choice C. I got B, D, and E. I do want to start to kill some of these answers immediately, guys, starting with choice D here. Choice D is arguably the worst answer on the board. Why would I ever want to say the boy, comma, who was injured when I could just say the injured boy? I don't want you to start telling me like, oh, it was unessential information, so on and so forth. There we go. I'm going to have to click that one after class. Good. When I look at something like choice D, because it is definitely important to know. It's like, which boy? The one that was injured, for sure. Definitely, all else equal, concision is clarity. But I never want to introduce an error by becoming shortened with my language that I'm using. Or do I want to sacrifice some sort of meaning in the process? So choice D, garbage. I'm looking at B versus E. Now, some of us try to get really fancy on this with this verb over here, had explained. I love me my perfect tenses, so let me start to use them. But we got to remember when to use it. So what tells me that this has to be in the simple past, folks, and not in the past perfect? There's one word up here that is so important, and again, it's outside the underline. What should I be recognizing? Yeah, excellent. It's that word while. While tells you it's concurrent. And then, exactly, so the while tells me that it's concurrent. And if that's the case, that tells me that it should have just been the while, the explained. Versus past perfect would mean it happened even before the simple past. No way, no how. But what's interesting here is nobody, well, I guess choice B kind of does it too, and choice D does, so never mind. I was going to say no one picked choice A. Choice A is the classic sucker on this, but you can't have those blood types in the past. Think about what you learned in the skill builder, if you did the skill builder. Universal conditions, they never change. That's all. So B, D, and E's, watch out for that misdirection. They gave you something in the past everywhere, thus you went into the past. Terrible. All right, I want to wrap up tense. I want to take a look maybe at maybe one structural error, and then we're going to call it a night. This is the last category. Remember how this operates? This really just wraps up really nicely all the different rules. Now, a lot of you have not been talking parallelism to me today, which is great. I think a lot of times people try to force parallelism in where it doesn't belong. Parallelism applies in certain situations, when you got lists, clearly, when you got certain expressions, of course. But otherwise, don't just be like, oh, it needs to be parallel. No, it doesn't. It'd be nice if it were parallel, but not at the expense of something else. Just keep that in mind. Even here, just real quickly, this is a good sentence, except it's improperly punctuated. But here's a good example of being is okay. Being unemployed can be difficult. Is being wrong? No, because it's ongoing. And they gave me some ongoing there. They said John was having, so that's ongoing as well. It's just that the way it's punctuated is incorrect. And you'd have other options that would obviously teach you as much. All right, with that then, I want to take a look at this next question. It is a good question. But again, this could be a long question, like to the guy who's like, oh yeah, I could do that in 12 seconds, basically. It's like, I love it. That same guy should be able to knock this question out in like 27 seconds, just using the strategy to kill it. I'm going to give you a good minute and a half on this, but it shouldn't take a minute and a half. If you're hungry and you're looking to employ what you've been learning, you should dismantle this almost immediately. Let's talk when a minute and a half is up. All right, let's go to town on this question, guys. I love the comment that just came my way. I've given up at this point as we have passed the 7 o'clock triple witching hour. But I'm telling you right now, just vertical scan, not horizontal, decision points, slash and burn. How the F can we not crack the code on sentence correction? That's like should be the biggest takeaway here. I love it on this question here. All I'm down to is, finally, today's also been so shitty, guys, I'll be honest with you, because we've had too many crappy answers on the board. That's what's like also robbed us of time. Because always my commitment to you is always I will go through every single answer choice no matter what. All I have are C and E on the board. Although it does look like the poll just kind of got all funky, but ignore it. When the poll closed, these were the only options. And this is correct. This is correct, and this is where everybody should be. Clearly, in this particular case, you got subject-verb agreement. All I got to do is slash and burn my way to figure out what the actual subject is. Clearly, the increase. When in doubt, guess singular. I'm down to C versus E here. And then, of course, D. But notice you have some will versus is. I can't be doing is soon supplanting. Soon's in the future. I will be doing it in the future. So you guys nailed it correctly between C and E here. Now, what's the difference? Because I can't figure it out from here. Just one word. Do I need a that or not? I don't know. Let me now go back and figure it out. C versus E. That's all I'm thinking. So when I look at this and I say, hey, what is the job of the word but? But's a conjunction. It's conjoining two different clauses. So as a result, I should be able to kill the but and everything that came before it. Does that stand alone there? It does not. I cannot have that leading that sentence. I know why someone probably put the that there, because they're thinking, oh, I need to have me some parallelism. But there's no parallelism that's in play, folks. I know you think there is, but there isn't. And that's the one thing that I just want to be very careful about. In this particular case, it isn't a construction that requires it. Having the that there makes it clunky. Choice E then becomes the best answer, hands down. And again, like I said, that's where we were, which was great. It was like, I think it was like 95% to 5%. All right, that's all I kind of want to say here, guys. Take a look at this last question here. I think it's a good one. More of the same, though. I want to wrap up the world of sentence construction, though, as well as the lesson here. Biggest takeaways should be, and I kind of already gave it to you, I suppose, on that last question. Get the content down. You can't run from it. And like, if English is my third language, and I don't have a lot of content experience with English, I can't be like, oh yeah, this decision points that he says is going to change my life. I'm going to just dig deep into it. No, it's not. You don't have the effing content underneath it that you need to have it change your life. But if you're pretty good but not an expert, this can change your life. And if you're an expert, dude, you should be able to get into the 90-some percentile almost immediately. Like, to me, that's what's beautiful about sentence correction. Low-hanging fruit, make it your advantage. All right, that's it for today. What's in store for tomorrow? Remember tomorrow, data sufficiency, very minimal skill builder. But let me be very emphatic right now. It is easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the most difficult math lesson to date. It will send many of you into a tailspin within just the first hour itself. Like, it is so easy to get hammered tomorrow. And the reason for it is because the math itself isn't challenging. I just think a lot of you are going to come to class on some high horse that you do not deserve to be sitting on. If you come to class tomorrow humble as all hell, and having crushed the very minimal skill builder, I think we'll do all right tomorrow. If you don't do that, it will be painful beyond all belief for me, which will then therefore become very painful for you. Please do me right tomorrow. Come to class ready to respect and rock. If not, please do me a favor. Don't come to class. Watch this shit on video. Save yourself and myself some unnecessary increases in our blood pressure. That's all I got to say here, folks. Sorry for running class so damn late, but hopefully it was well worth it. I think sentence correction is important. Put in the time to rock it. And worry about the other stuff. You need it. All right, that's all I got to say, folks. Have a good rest of the night. I'll see you guys all tomorrow at the same time as usual. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.